Basically, just a question about pedestrians. When you're doing this traffic studies, did you notice the pedestrians walking up and down WW along those to the field? Could they walk basically on the street at night?
I don't know that we did notice many. I'm not saying they weren't there. I just don't know if we noticed them. I know as I was coming here today, there was someone that was pushing a bike that had gotten off the trail down closer to King Street. I forget what that bridge is. Right? No. Anyway, I saw someone walking on the little 2-3 foot shoulder pushing a bike. Wouldn't surprise me if there's not pedestrians along the side of the road. Obviously, there's very little, if any, true accommodations for any pedestrians along the side of the road. But that's something that when we did our count, we didn't really show any, I don't believe.
So will there be anything to provide accommodations for pedestrians?
We currently don't have any plans to really do anything. I have to say it quite that bluntly. You know, if there was plans to widen WW, and I guess on some level, the study that looked at extending Stadium Boulevard from where it is today to I-70, it did look at this part of WW as part of that potential improvement. You know, if that road was being rebuilt to accommodate additional traffic, then whenever we do a project, pedestrians is something that we do look at as part of those new projects. If someone else wanted to come along to put pedestrian facilities along this road, we would work with them on that. We would let them use the MODOT right away if that's where they wanted to put it. But expanding the pedestrian system is really not something that MODOT is really doing right now. For that matter, we're not really expanding the highway system right now either.
To expand on that just a little bit, for example, Route PP or Clark Lane from basically the connector east to the bus barn, the city of Columbia actually paid to put those shoulders on PP, 5-foot shoulder, due to the pedestrians that were walking on that roadway as well. So we worked with them hand in hand, and they added those improvements. A lot of people say, you know, the shoulder's not the right place, but it was better than what was going on. So that's the path that the city wanted to go on that project.
And I believe that was constructed so that could be future lane. So while it's a shoulder today, it was built so that it could handle traffic in the future. When that road was rebuilt to look more like further to the east, out past the Lynx apartment complex. And I think that's generally the city's desire, is to have it kind of look the same. So that shoulder that was added to give a pedestrians a spot now could be lane in the future whenever it was expanded, and there would be a completely separate pedestrian facility at that time, similar to on further to the east.
I just had a question. A few years ago, when Casey's was built out here, and the subdivision had a different entry and everything. And over the years, Casey's remodeled and the state's done their work and everything. And I noticed that, and I know other people can point this out, if you're in a vehicle that's a low-slung vehicle, the crown of the road is shifted, so you can no longer hardly see down the hill unless you're in a high four-wheel type vehicle. If you go out here, you'll see what I'm talking about. It seems to be like that would be something, who would be talked to in the highway department, or is that on the Casey's right away, to get that crown taken off so you can see down the hill when you're in a low vehicle. I think that would help prevent some of these accidents you're having, because people pull out, they don't see a car that's a low profile vehicle coming up that hill anymore because of that crown on this hillside over here. Just a thought.
I mean, we can look at it a little bit if it's on right away. Maybe it's something that we could do just a little bit. One of the big issues with that is that there's utilities underground and having to deal with those. I did fail to mention that was one of the questions that was asked about, was the sight distance, and we did measure the sight distance. Basically what we found is it's a little bit deceiving in that you can't see the road, but you can see a car. Obviously the taller the car, the better you can see it. But we look at what is typically a driver's eye height, which is like 3.5 feet above the pavement, to another eye height of about 3.5 feet above the pavement. And what we found is you could see somewhere, and it's kind of hard to tell exactly because there's just enough curve in the road that you're looking through the westbound lanes. But generally you can see a car coming eastbound or from the west at probably around 650 feet-ish, somewhere in that ballpark. Again, that gets into what the person is driving, or how fast that person's driving. if they're driving the speed limit, that's more than enough sight distance to make a good decision to pull out. The reality is, whenever the El Chaparral road was determined to go in, the speed limit was probably 55 miles an hour. And actually, that sight distance of around 650 feet is a little bit more than what we would, like 610 is what we look for on a 55 mile an hour road. So yes, it probably could be improved, but what's there doesn't meet our minimums to be able to pull onto the road. And if that road was one, if El Chaparral was coming in today, and we looked at what we have sight distance wise there, we would allow it to come in.
So you know the ground I'm talking about?
I think so, yeah.
I mean, you look, you can see it flat, and then it just kind of hauls, and then it goes down. Right?
Yeah.
I mean, it used to not be there. You could literally see down to the creek bottom.
Okay.
Which, when you get a car coming up the hill, and they fly, I've seen them.
Oh, yeah, there's some that are going really
70
fast,
miles
no
an
doubt.
hour, and they swoop right through here. Person pulls out, and wham, it's all there.
Sure.
I think those people too that put in those signs, the entrance, like Casey's.
Yes.
The signs for whatever they're advertising at the time. Realtors, sometimes open houses, sometimes people that are trying to hire or whatever. Those are all on the way. And for a low-slung vehicle, as Don was recommending, those signs take away that line of sight completely. And I think that's where a large part of the problem comes from.
There's not supposed to be any sign no right of way. Obviously, if it does happen, we don't police the right of way on daily, but if somebody calls and says, you know, we've got a 800 number, 800 ask MODOT, or 888 ask MODOT, give them specifics, it'll get to our maintenance shed, we'll come out and move those signs if they're on the right of way.
How far away from the highway should it be for the right of way?
We probably own around 30 feet from the middle of the road. That's a really rough guess. That's a pretty typical for this type of road, but without doing some digging and some plans and some survey work to get exactly opening, we'd have to do that. But typically around 30 feet from the middle of the road. The road itself is probably somewhere around 12, 13 feet to the edge of pavement from the center. So what's another 18 feet or so from there is probably roughly the right way line.
The El Chaparral signs that exist today are probably really close to the right of way line. So if they're out in front of that, they're most likely on the right of way. So don't hesitate to call that number and we'll remove them. And typically they're probably those yard signs that people stick them. Yeah.
I would also like to talk about the pedestrians and the bicyclists. When we drive at night, it's very dark and it's twisty and down and up the hill. And a lot of times the bicyclists are wearing dark clothing. And when someone is passing opposing you at the same time, to give them a little bit more room, sometimes you might creep towards the right, you know, so that you're not so close to the median in case somebody's a little over their area. But you can't do that if someone is walking or riding or walking a bike there. And this happens almost every time we drive that road at night now. There's at least one or two people on that road, and we don't see them until we're right upon them. And I'm really worried that we're going to hit one, and I don't want that to be the impetus for something. I don't know how we can keep people from doing it, because they're just trying to get into town to do whatever they've got to do. They probably don't have transportation. The bus routes that come out here. So, you know, that is a concern of just more than one person. That I've also had that concern. The other thing I'd like to ask about is the control of snow and ice. Somebody said to me, I don't know if this is true, that there used to be more of a bigger system that took care of it, but then like local people now are having to deal with it, but they weren't prepared, which is why that big ice thing blocked up the town last winter. I just don't know, like, who is responsible for our snow and ice in El Chaparral, not on the area in WW now?
On WW itself, same people it always were. Nothing has changed in that regards. That was the stars aligned, and we paid for a weather forecast system. It came in, the temperatures did not raise like they were expecting. Schools didn't let out because they had the same forecast we did. So when the ice hit, you know, we did not have any chemical down on the road. So it took that much more time, manpower, and material to get it burned off the road. So that is the reason we had the situation we had. It wasn't just WW. It was
All over
five counties wide.
But I've just never had that. You know, I've lived in this area for 20 years, and I just didn't know why now. Is there something different?
Well, once again, ice is a terrible thing to have to deal with, and we We put our eggs in the basket of what the forecast said, and it was wrong. So when the second forecast came, we took absolutely every precaution and spent a lot of money to be prepared, staff, material down the road, and it didn't materialize. It was money well spent, because we could have had the same thing we had the first time, but that's what happened on the first round.
Yeah, the first ice storm, the forecast all said it was going to get warm enough that it was going to turn into rain. And so the decision was made not to put a lot of salt on the road, because then if it turns to rain, the salt ends up in the ditch and doesn't do any good at all, and we've spent the money. That didn't happen. So we, maybe you could say, learned a lesson, and we went ahead and put extra down beforehand whenever that second ice storm was forecasted.
Are there any bike trail access plans for any bike trail access for our neighborhood?
The city parks department is the one that deals with the trails. And so you may be aware, over by the connection you've got under the bridge that kind of comes over here and goes into Timbersdale. I would imagine that they're planning on connecting that trail at some point over to the Vineyards Park that I was talking about earlier, and that the idea with the city also follows, similar to what MODOT is saying, is that on brand new roads, pedestrian facilities are required now to be part of that road design. But it requires it to be a new road. And so when you're retrofitting old ones, they don't necessarily do that, because it doesn't make a lot of sense to put in, 200 feet of a pedestrian facility where there's 3 miles of nothing on either side of it. It's just not going to happen. So part of the philosophy there is to work with the Parks Department to try to separate the vehicular traffic from the dedicated vehicular areas, and have the pedestrian and bicycle facilities, the major ones, more aligned with the trail system in the parks, where they're not having to fight with the traffic, where the pedestrians and the bikes always lose. So it's just one of those things where if you can keep the two separated and still make it a decent system where they could get to where they're going, it would be better. And so that's my understanding, is that's where the eventual connection is. Similar to, it actually crosses under I-70 now. They finally got that one trail set that gets on under I-70 and is eventually, hopefully, going to get all the way out to where it can connect up to get to the high school. Now, that being said, the desire is that people who would be biking or walking on like WW, at some point, the desire is that they would start to drift off of the road system and use the pedestrian and bike facilities more as their main conduit, rather than trying to compete, especially if they're not going to do it in a manner where they're going to do it safely in bright clothing or with lights and the other stuff. But that's the plan, is to do it through the park system.
When Thad was talking earlier, he mentioned the signal to the east, and I'm guessing there's probably some questions on either where that is or what that is. At Elk Park Drive, there's a signal there. It's never been turned on. It actually didn't have all the signal heads on it at one time. We used those somewhere else. Basically, the way that all came about is whenever Old Hawthorne was coming in or being developed, and I don't remember all the exact details. I think it might have been part of their annexation agreement. There were some things that they were required to do along WW. They put in turn lanes on out through the drive and go directly into Old Hawthorne. They were required to put in a signal at Rolling Hills, and they were going to put in a signal at Elk Park. There were some other developments that weren't part of that developer's plans, but other developers in the area, with the vineyards and then the area around Elk Park, I don't remember the name of it. Anyway.
Concord Estates.
There you go. And there were some connections, and Thad talked about the connection from your all subdivision with the lake and the park and stuff. There was another connection that was supposed to go over to the vineyards, and basically those didn't happen. Developers that had plans that they thought were going to happen didn't happen. And so the main developer of Old Hawthorne put the signal in, and we were getting ready to turn it on, and we looked down the road, and we basically said, this doesn't really go anywhere. There's not that many houses on this road, it doesn't go anywhere, we shouldn't turn this on. And so really that kind of gets into when a signal's needed. We basically look at the volume of traffic using an intersection to determine whether or not a signal's needed. Because what we find is that there's not enough traffic on the side roads specifically, and so the signal doesn't change very often. People don't expect it to change. And then the next time they come through, it does change, and they've almost like forgotten the signal's there. And so we can have more accidents if we put signals at locations that don't really have the demand than where it's needed. So that's why that signal never got turned on. As Dad was talking about, it's looking like that the developer from the vineyards is getting closer to make that connection. When they do make that connection, we'll have to reevaluate whether or not we're going to turn that signal on and have that opportunity. Just like if the connection to the El Chaparral subdivision was made through the park, we would be looking at that as well. The other thing you talked about, the development on the north side, part of their plan is to add the fourth leg to that intersection. So we don't know, and I mentioned earlier that the developer was to put a signal in at Rolling Hills. When the plans were done, we basically gave them the go-ahead to do that. I don't know exactly why they hadn't done it, but then they came back to us and said, would this be a better spot for a roundabout? And we visited with them, we visited with the city, looked at several different things and said, yeah, it probably would be. And so that signal got changed to a roundabout. Probably in part because the same developer put the signal in and never got turned on. So I think he has some hard feelings about us and signals. I might too. So whenever that fourth leg comes in, right now it's probably going to be a signal. We don't know that 100% for sure because part of that signal is going to have to be rebuilt to handle that additional leg. So it might be an opportunity to do something different. Also, as Dad mentioned, El Chaparral has been identified as a future signal. At some point, that decision is going to have to be made. Is it a signal or is it a roundabout, or what that's going to look like? And it's coming. I mean, that's the thing that the count showed us. And whenever I was talking earlier about the amount of traffic that's needed to be at an intersection before we signalize it, El Chaparral is on its way there. I mean, I can sit here and say someday there's going to be a signal at that intersection. I don't know exactly when that's going to be. There's going to be, if it is a signal, there's going to need to be some additional lanes put on WW. I mean, if we put a signal in and there's no left turn lanes, we actually feel like that would probably increase accidents. And the reality is, if there was left turn lanes there and we signalized it today, the number of accidents that happen there would probably go up. People don't like hearing that, they don't really understand that. But whenever you have a road that right now people drive by, and I think somewhere around 11,000 people drive by and never stop, whenever all of a sudden you tell them, okay, now you're stopping, they don't all stop. Roundabouts tend to have fewer crashes. That's one of the reasons why we did that at Rolling Hills. So signals typically have more crashes after we put a signal in, but they're usually a lot less severe. So those left turning crashes, while they can still happen, typically don't happen as often, but the rear end accidents, they sometimes go through the roof. And we have some things we try to do to reduce that possibility with some letting the computer know that a car's coming farther away and some of that kind of stuff. But that is what we would expect anytime we put a signal in, that the pure number go up, but typically the severity go down. So if you did wonder why that signal was there, the heads went away because if you remember whenever the apartment downtown Columbia caught on fire, there by Stevens, it was so hot that it burned our signal heads off. And they melted, and we said, where can we get some signal heads? And we knew a signal that wasn't turned on, so we came and got them. So hopefully I was being resourceful, but that's kind of the story behind that signal. It was never turned on.
Could we maybe get some turning lanes at least, so people that are going from east to west, if you're going to turn into El Chaparral, they're not going to block all the traffic moving in from the east going into town. They could just pull over, and also have one going east where we could just swing into El Chaparral and get off the main highway. Could they not just widen that a little bit and put at least turning lanes in there? And also, there's a little dip when you come off the WW. You kind of dip down coming into El Chaparral, and as you're going out, which is kind of, you drop down, you have to pull way out next to the highway to see if there's a car coming. Of course, I drive a sedan. There's been many times I think, oh, there's no cars coming, and all of a sudden you're halfway out there and there's a car right there. And you just can't see it because you dip down. Can they not put some concrete right there at that stoplight to bring that up a little bit so you can see it a little bit better?
Stoplight or stop sign? Possibly. Haven't looked at it specifically for that, but earlier the gentleman was talking about the down the road, maybe raising El Chaparral just a little bit might be the other way of accomplishing seeing down the road again. Can left turn lanes be put in? Absolutely, they can be. Don't really know when, and don't really know where the resources are going to come from for that. If that was something that raises to our level of need, we have needs all over. I think, through this process of you all contacting us and us looking at it, has made us realize, okay, this is closer than we probably realized. And so the chances of it, getting on a higher need, we work with the county and some other planning folks on the needs. We also do some cost sharing with different people. We're looking at a roundabout going in on King Street at the outer road. So up by the interstate, and that's a job that we're going to basically split the cost 50-50 with Mike's, I think that's right, with the city. So some improvement here, that could be a possibility of something like that. So that's not a great answer. I mean, yes, they can go in. Don't really know when that would be. It might actually make turning left out just a little bit harder because now you have 2 lanes to kind of worry about. But it would probably still be an overall benefit and a good thing.
I think a right turn lane eastbound coming into El Chap would be of great help because as I slow down coming up the hill to turn any of